Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 34 team selection where the free hit is active and I'll show you the changes that I've made over the last few days. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, we're just going to jump straight into Game Week 34 here and not review Game Week 33. The reason for that is I'm having to record this slightly earlier than usual because my friend is getting married on Friday. And in fact, that therefore means this will be my last piece of content this week. So no deadline decisions, sadly, and no deadline stream. It is just a one-off. Usually I take my equipment with me, but I decided to just enjoy the time with my friends, enjoy the wedding, and I'll be back for Game Week 35, of course. If you do want more content, I recorded an episode of FPL Therapy this week where I went through all of the best players to buy, free hits, different teams that you want to target. So please do go and check that out. But yeah, essentially, as I'm recording this slightly early, I'm actually recording this a couple of hours before the Arsenal versus Palace game. So I don't actually know what my final rank is. I don't know what my final points are. I do, though, know that my bench boost got me 13 points, which usually I'd be very disappointed in. But considering what's happened across the last couple of weeks with bench boost and the likes of Dan Burn getting minus points and João Pedro getting sent off, honestly, 13 points doesn't seem too bad. I should hopefully finish on a green arrow, but it doesn't look like it'll be a massive one. So I really do need this free hit to go well if I want to reach my target of the top 10k. And that is my target because of where I am. My season target at the start was top 50k. So really, I should be very happy. But when you are only within, I think I'm like 18 or 19 points off the top 10k, of course, I'm going to go for it. But I won't be too disheartened if I finish a little bit short. So for my Game Week 34 free hit, I have been changing it a fair amount, but I keep seemingly coming back to roughly the same structure, and like 7 or 8 of the players tend to be pretty consistent. And actually, this draft that I'm about to show you, I haven't changed it for over 24 hours. So I'm feeling pretty happy with it. There are going to be players that you want that you can't include, but that is the nature of when you're picking from, like, I'd say there's about 30 players I'm selecting from, and a lot of people are. It is inevitably going to feel like you're going to miss out on hauls. There will be someone that you've had in a draft that sadly does really well that isn't in the draft that you actually end up submitting at the deadline. So that is the nature, as I say, of a free hit. Starting with the goalkeepers, I've got Pope and Kepa at the moment, and I've been changing these around a lot. And I don't necessarily think that the best use of a Newcastle spot probably is Nick Pope. But let me explain how I've arrived with Nick Pope being my goalkeeper. I think that if you look at the bookies odds, Newcastle are projected to score the most goals this week, but they're also projected to as the highest chance of keeping a clean sheet. So they are the only team with over a 40% chance, according to the bookies, of keeping a clean sheet, but they also have the most projected goals. So in an ideal world, you would have more than 3 Newcastle players. I think a double up on the attack in isolation probably makes more sense. You are targeting the fixture where the most goals are expected for a team, and therefore the upside is at its highest. With defenders, you might only get 6 points if they keep a clean sheet, but if they win 4 or 5-0 and you have an attacker, they could go absolutely massive. My concern with the attackers, as we'll maybe discuss in more detail when we look at the midfield, is I just think there are quite a lot of doubts around Barnes and Murphy's minutes because Gordon is back fit and available and ready to start as far as we are concerned from a fitness perspective. I don't think he will. I think Barnes and Murphy will continue to start. But who is to say that you know which one will come off? Because Murphy tends to be the one that is getting 60-minute subs. Quite often now, he comes off, Barnes goes to the right, Gordon comes on the left. Fine, so maybe you go for Barnes. But if Murphy's having a great game, or maybe we just don't know, Barnes is slightly more tired than Murphy, how do we know that it isn't Barnes that comes off at 60? And maybe that's a risk worth taking, but when there are so many good attackers that are nailed on for 90 minutes on penalties, picking a player that might have 60 minutes in this game, I don't love it that much. So I keep coming back to then having double Newcastle defence. And I've had a few drafts where I've had like Livramento and Fabian Schär, or Livramento and Trippier, or Trippier and Fabian Schär. But I also really like Ait-Nouri, Sessegnon, Cucurella, Van Dijk, the defenders that I've chosen. I think there are loads of really good defenders. So I actually just experimented, just going, do you know what? I'll just have Nick Pope and then a Newcastle defender. And I've stuck with it, and I actually quite like it for the time being. So I'm not promising that this will be the setup, but I quite like Pope and a Newcastle defender. I've got Kepa on the bench. I think Kepa or Sanchez will end up being my sort of backup goalkeeper. I think that Bournemouth have a very decent chance of a clean sheet against the United team that are pretty toothless and will rotate ahead of their Europa League semi-final. So I think Kepa is great, but I also think Sanchez and Chelsea have a really decent chance for a clean sheet. Probably after Newcastle, I might argue that they have the second best chance of a clean sheet. So I quite like the idea of having Sanchez, but regardless, I would hope that Nick Pope doesn't miss out and that he is my goalkeeper this week. In terms of Livramento versus Fabian Schär versus Trippier versus Dan Burn, like choosing one of those Newcastle defenders, the data over the last 10 suggests that Livramento is the most attacking. He has the highest XGI per 90. And when I watch the games, and honestly, this is more of an eye test pick, believe it or not, FPL Raptor having an eye test pick. But when I watch the games, and I've watched a lot of Newcastle, Livramento stands out as being absolutely exceptional in recent weeks. I think he's getting really close to goal. He's had so many touches in the box. His baseline bonus is really high. I know Fabian Schär loves a bullet header. He scored 2 goals in 2 weeks. He hit the crossbar from inside his own half. And Kieran Trippier is on set pieces and takes direct free kicks. So the dream is there with a free kick from Trippier or a Trippier cross to a Fabian Schär header. But from open play, Livramento strikes me as the one that is most likely to get a return. And I feel like he's been very unlucky in the last couple of weeks not to get at least one more attacking return. So more of an eye test pick, but the data does support it. I just really like Livramento. So I've gone Pope and Livramento at the moment. And then actually on FPL Therapy, I discussed that what I did is I looked at the data across the last 10 game weeks and I sorted the available defenders by non-penalty XGI per 90. So I basically looked at the attacking threat of all of the defenders that you could choose on a free hit this week. And the top 3 this week, the top 3 across the last 10 were Sessegnon, then Aït-Nouri, then Livramento. So if you want to select the 3 defenders with the most attacking threat across the last 10 weeks, you are choosing Sessegnon, Aït-Nouri, and Livramento, which is roughly why I've gone with them. For Aït-Nouri, though, Wolves are actually 8th across the last 10 for expected goals conceded. Under Vitor Pereira, they're looking pretty good. They've got 4 clean sheets in 10 weeks. So not only does Aït-Nouri carry a lot of attacking threat, which we know, I actually think Wolves have been much better defensively. If I were to double up on one defence this week that wasn't Newcastle, it would probably be Wolves. This will, of course, be the week that they decide to stop defending well and they'll concede to Leicester. But on paper, they look pretty good. And then with Sessegnon, he's the one that's probably least locked in with my defence right now because I do have worries over his minutes. He started the last 3 games as a right winger and he's played very well. And actually, in his early days, I believe at Fulham, he was playing more of an attacking role. It's almost like we saw Bukayo Saka playing left back occasionally. Then he played on the right wing and all of a sudden it was like he shouldn't have ever been playing in a defensive role. I do kind of feel the same way about Sessegnon. So maybe they see Sessegnon as the right winger of the future. But with Harry Wilson back now, who is a natural right winger and has been very good for Fulham this season, I do just worry, could Harry Wilson start? They've also got Willian. I don't even know if he's fit and available, but he's an option. They've got Adama Traore. It's not like they're lacking natural wingers that can play on the right wing. So will Sessegnon start? Currently, I believe yes, which is why he's in my draft. The next question you have to ask yourself is how likely is he to make it to 60 minutes? Could he get subbed in the 55th minute for Harry Wilson? Because he's a defender. You want the attacking threat, but you need him to make it to 60 to at least have a chance for a clean sheet. I also just think Southampton are a bit of a bogey team for me. Like whenever I try and target them, I don't tend to do too well. So yeah, I've got Sessegnon in there now because he's got 0.58 non-penalty expected goal involvement per 90 since getting into this more advanced role. To put that into perspective, that is better underlying data than Palmer, Mbeumo, Salah, Kluivert. Take your pick. He's pretty much got better attacking data than most of the attackers and midfielders that we're looking at this week. So it feels like the upside is there for him, but I do have worry over his minutes. If I decide not to go for Sessegnon, I have a couple of options. The first would be, rather than Sessegnon and Pope, I simply go Leno and Fabian Schär. I still have Fulham, I still have Newcastle, but I just switch Pope and Sessegnon to Schär and Leno. The other option I have is to just do Sessegnon to Robinson. So still have this set up, but go for Robinson instead. The third option is just drop Fulham defence altogether and put in who is my current 4th favourite defender, which is Cucurella. So rather than Sessegnon, Cucurella comes in. I cover the Chelsea clean sheet instead, but then that would leave me, spoiler alert, with 0 Fulham in my starting 11, which seems a bit crazy considering they play the team that are bottom of the Premier League. I've got Van Dijk on the bench because as long as, and I'm recording this before the Arsenal Palace game, as long as Arsenal do win that game, then it's going to be the title-winning game for Liverpool at Anfield. Obviously, if Arsenal do not win and Palace beat them, then it might not be. And at that stage, maybe we don't want to invest as heavily in the Liverpool players, but we'll discuss that later in the week. And obviously, you'll see my final draft as well. But I'm pretty confident, as of right now, that I will have Aït-Nouri, a Newcastle defender, probably Livramento, and then one of Sessegnon and Cucurella. I don't imagine that the backline will change much beyond that. So that's the defence. Gone full-blown attack in double Newcastle for the clean sheet. Let's look at the midfield 4. So guys, moving on to the midfield. At the moment, I'm playing in a 3-4-3 because in all honesty, as much as I do think there are some good midfielders to choose from, it's actually the forwards that I'm desperate to own more from. If I could play a 3-3-4 and have 4 forwards and 3 midfielders, I would almost definitely do that. And we'll discuss the forwards when we move on to them. But that means at the moment, most of the time I'm lining up in a 3-4-3, which is strange because if you've watched my content for a while, you'll know that I usually prefer midfielders. I always say extra point for a goal, extra point for a clean sheet. And as a result, I feel like midfielders can go big a lot more often. So let's use the example of Brian Mbeumo. Brian Mbeumo got the 2 goals and an assist and got an 18-pointer. If a striker, a forward, gets 3 goals, a hat-trick, and full bonus, they get 17. So I just feel like a midfielder has to do slightly less. That being said, at the moment, like I say, I'm lining up in a 3-4-3. I don't think this midfield will be popular at all. In fact, I know from speaking to people on social media, this will be a very unpopular midfield because I have Cole Palmer, who everyone genuinely hates, like despises as a pick. The comments on social media have been genuinely out of hand about how bad of a pick he is. And then Brian Mbeumo, I know people will see this and think it's knee-jerky, and it's not a very exciting, sexy differential pick. Like, he's playing against Forest away. He's off the back of an 18-pointer. Can't you have a bit more fun with FPL, Ross? So I'm prepared, but let's talk through it. On Cole Palmer, it is getting to a stage now where so many people hate him as a pick, so many people think he's finished, and so many people think he'll never score a goal again, that he's a super differential. I've run polls on social media. We're looking at about 60% of people won't own Cole Palmer on Twitter. And I've said that Twitter is slightly less knee-jerky in response to outcome and looks at underlying data more and is sometimes quite patient. So if 40% of Twitter are looking at having him, I'd say it's probably even less than that in terms of the overall player base. I reckon we could be looking at a Cole Palmer that's down at like 30%. And there aren't many players in FPL, and I truly believe this. In fact, I think he might have the highest ceiling in FPL. There aren't many players that can go and get 3+ returns in a given game. Palmer is one of them. And you might say that yes, but not under Maresca. We've seen it under Maresca, right? And I know that was a little while ago now, but I don't believe all of a sudden that Cole Palmer can't find the back of the net, that he can't find that special pass, that he can't score a penalty as well, and he is on penalty. So I'm not trying to convince you to do the same. I find it quite strange when people get really angry at other people for choosing a player in their team. If you think Palmer's bad, that's great. If you think Palmer's terrible and 30% of people are picking Palmer in their free hit, you should be thinking, that's brilliant. I won't say anything because I want to see 30% of people fail. So don't be angry at me choosing Palmer. Be happy if you think he's bad. I don't think this is a great fixture. I think Everton are a pretty good defence. And I don't think Palmer's in a good position right now in terms of the way that he's playing. I don't think the team are structured particularly well under Maresca. They're not playing with much confidence or motivation. I get all of that, but it only takes one game to change. I think that last-minute goal for them against Fulham, I think that will give them a little bit of a spark. I think that Everton being probably without Tarkowski because of that hamstring injury he picked up, that's another major bonus because whether they bring O'Brien across into centre-back and have to play someone else at right-back, or if they play Michael Keane, that is a massive downgrade on Tarkowski. He's playing at home. I just like the idea of Cole Palmer. I don't have to own him long-term. This is a free hit. I don't have to transfer him in. I can get rid. If he's terrible this week, great. I don't have him from 35 onwards. So yeah, I don't even think I need to justify much beyond that. I just like it as a pick. But if you don't like it, absolutely understand. Just go without. And again, view it as a positive. If you think lots of people are making a mistake, that's a really good thing for you. On Brian Mbeumo, I would say, right, it depends what you're looking at here. If you're looking at season-long data, and if you're looking at the narrative that suits Nottingham Forest, they are fighting for Champions League football. Season-long data is very strong. Last season, they were 4th for expected goals conceded, and they are much better at home. So if you want to build that narrative, you then look at it and say, why are you owning Brian Mbeumo against a team fighting for Europe that are better at home and great defensively across 2 seasons worth of data? So that's the narrative to not own Brian Mbeumo. The narrative to own Brian Mbeumo is that Nottingham Forest over the last 10 are 16th for expected goals conceded, which means the only teams worse than them are Spurs and the 3 promoted teams. They also have a much shorter turnaround in terms of after their semi-final, they've only got a few days. So they obviously played not only later than Brentford in 33, they're then going to have the FA Cup semi-final and then play against Brentford. So they've got a big game there right in the middle just before the game against Brentford. Brentford have a 12-day break between Game Week 33 and Game Week 34. So for those reasons, I think, do you know what? We could be looking at a fatigued Nottingham Forest defence that naturally anyway have had a drop-off in their data across the last 10 weeks, so are slightly weaker, and Brian Mbeumo's clearly in a decent place in terms of his recent form. He's just gone off the back of a brilliant performance in Game Week 33. So I think for all of those reasons, you could definitely justify Brian Mbeumo. It's up to you, right? It depends what narrative you want to fall on there. I think he is a good pick, maybe a very good pick. I don't necessarily think he's an excellent one or essential. If you told me that you are going without Brian Mbeumo, I wouldn't bat an eyelid. I'd just say, yep, that's absolutely fine. There are lots of other good midfielders. What do I love about Mbeumo and Palmer? They're on penalties. They tend to play 90 minutes. And on top of that, they have some set pieces as well. Brian Mbeumo takes a lot more than Palmer, but they both have the option to be on a set piece. And we know from both of them that they are two unique players in that they have an incredibly high ceiling. So I'll leave it there because I know I've just spent like over 5 minutes basically like, please give me approval on my picks about Palmer and Mbeumo. I've just spent time basically being defensive and trying to justify. The reason for that is, again, I've seen a lot on social media that people just aren't happy with the Palmer and Mbeumo picks. And again, that is a really, really good thing. I think you should view that positively if you think people are making mistakes. I would kick myself, right? Let me paint a picture. If rather than Palmer and Mbeumo, I went for 2 minutes risk like Jota and Barnes, and they both played like 55 to 60 minutes, and then Palmer and Mbeumo both got a penalty and played 90, I would just be like, Ross, what are you doing? Pick the penalty takers, pick the 90-minute men, pick the players that have multiple routes to points, and just hope that you get a little bit lucky there. So it's just the way that I like to play FPL. I don't necessarily advise that you follow. So Mbeumo and Palmer are there. I've got Salah as my captain right now. I'll be honest, what is it, 8 or 9 games now without a goal, open play goal in all competitions? Salah's not in a particularly good place, but again, as long as Arsenal beat Palace, this is the title-winning game for Liverpool at Anfield. This is a Salah game, and Spurs are not very good. Attacking-wise, they're a little bit better. Defensively, they really, really are bad. Whichever way you try to paint it, eye test, underlying data, Spurs are targetable. So it just feels like such a good fixture. I don't think I want to back against Salah captaincy. The final spot in the midfield 4 at the moment, I've currently got Luis Diaz. I think Luis Diaz is a fantastic pick. I've got a bit of an issue in when I start seeing lots of other people with a player in their team, especially at this point in the season, it puts me off them. So at the start of the week, I thought Luis Diaz was brilliant. He was locked into my free hit draft, but I haven't seen a single free hit draft without Luis Diaz now, and it's starting to make me think, could I go without him? And I genuinely think you could. Now, if I was to go without Luis Diaz right now, the player that I would be most likely to go for instead is honestly Diogo Jota. I'm very tempted to just still target that fixture, still have a Liverpool attacker, but just go for the one that will be much lower owned. Why will he be much lower owned? He's not in a particularly good run of form. He missed three big chances off the bench, by the way, in Game Week 33. You might view that and say, oh, it's great, he got the 3 big chances, but he was benched, he missed all of them, he's not looking particularly good. And if there is a player to be subbed off in the 55th minute, if they start, it's much more likely to be Jota than Diaz. So I do wonder if I'm just trying to be too clever with it there. The other player that I would like to get in is Harvey Barnes, right? It makes sense having a Newcastle attacker outside of Isak. Isak will be so highly owned you won't gain much. It's Ipswich at home, and Barnes has been brilliant. So I would love to have Barnes in. So what I could do is go for Barnes in the Diaz spot, and I've been thinking about this, and then either go for Sanchez or Kepa in goal, or maybe even go for Alisson. Like if I want another Liverpool player, go for Alisson in goal. He might make some saves. They could keep a clean sheet. Maybe Barnes instead of Diaz is the way to lean, and then I don't have to have the double up on the Newcastle defence. But then I'm just looking at it and thinking, I want a Liverpool attacker that's not Salah. I want to gain from Liverpool scoring goals. Kluivert's obviously on the bench. You'll understand why he's on the bench in a second, because I don't want to go too all in on Bournemouth absolutely battering United. But I do also think that Kluivert, as a penalty taker, on the set pieces and getting good minutes, is also a good option. There are other midfielders I've not discussed, like a Iwobi, Menetzi, etc. But I would be very surprised if Salah, Palmer, and a Liverpool midfielder aren't in there. And I'm pretty sure Mbeumo will be, but of course subject to change. Let's take a look at the front three. So moving on to the front three, and at the moment, it's Isak, Cunha, and Eva Nilsson. I'll start with the obvious two, Isak and Cunha. I'd be very surprised if Isak and Cunha aren't in my team. The only concern will be around Cunha that I'll discuss in a second, that we don't know 100% that he starts. But they're playing against Leicester at home and Ipswich at home. They're both on penalties. We know Cunha is brilliant for baseline bonus and also on set pieces. And Isak, yes, he's not been very good recently, and he's not scored as many goals as you would hope. And his underlying data has dropped off. He's missing the chances he does get. But you'd still be a very brave man or woman to go without Isak on your free hit. Ipswich at home. It does feel a little bit overthinking in terms of to remove him. Now, if I were really chasing, let's say I was 30 to 40 points behind my mini league leader or 30 to 40 points behind my target rank, I probably would go without one of Isak or Salah. Because if you go for, let's say you go for Salah and captain Salah and just have Isak, you're not gaining anything from Isak. And let's say you go with Isak captaincy, having Salah in your team, he's actually hurting your rank again. So if I were chasing, I would definitely opt to go without one of Salah or Isak. But for me, where I'm actually pretty happy with my overall rank, I don't want to completely derail my season. I think I'm going to have Isak in there. He's currently got my Vice armband. And Cunha, if I knew that Cunha was going to start, I may well captain Cunha. I think he's that good for this week. Because I think Leicester are the worst team in the league. I think they're worse than Southampton at the moment. Andy's at home. And again, Cunha just needs to sneeze and he'll get bonus points. Like, he literally doesn't even have to get a return and he'll get bonus. He's one of very few players, along with the likes of like De Bruyne and Bruno Fernandes, where they will literally pick up bonus points sometimes without having a return. If he gets a return, then he's obviously nailed on for 3 bonus. So he could just get a little assist and get you like 7 or 8 points. It's brilliant. And I think he's going to want to show himself to potential suitors. There are obviously rumours going around that United have already agreed personal terms, but he'll want to show what he's all about in these final few games. So if Cunha starts, he's nailed, or I think he's going to, and I think he's a genuine captaincy option. The concern is that the front three that they had in the absence of Cunha, in Bellegarde, Strand Larsen and Menezes, worked incredibly well. We had comments from Vitor Pereira about how good that trio was, especially the link up between Menezes and Strand Larsen, and I would argue in that time Bellegarde has been one of their better players. So, yes, Cunha went straight back into the starting 11 in Game Week 33, but it was because Bellegarde was out. If we get confirmation that Bellegarde is fit, there is a small chance, and I don't think it's a huge chance, but there's a small chance that he goes back to the front three that worked so well for them in Bellegarde, Strand Larsen and Menezes. Menezes seems to be a 90-minute man. I don't see him being dropped. And he also plays as a right 10, whereas Bellegarde and Cunha would be on the left. So I see Menezes starting. Strand Larsen is an out-and-out number 9. Cunha just isn't. So I think Strand Larsen starts as the 9. So really, what I think it comes down to is you've got one remaining position in that attack for Cunha or Bellegarde. Cunha is a better player, right? No one is probably disagreeing with that. But Cunha is also leaving Wolves. Bellegarde probably won't. So I think I could imagine a situation where they play Bellegarde if they're thinking about the future a little bit more, and also maybe a little bit angry at Cunha wanting to leave. There's a lot of narratives going on here right now. You could just view it as Vitor Pereira and Wolves will want to win as many games as they can to end the season. Cunha is their best player, therefore they play Cunha. And obviously if Bellegarde is ruled out or a major doubt, I think it makes it a lot easier to just start Cunha. But I just do have some doubts and reservations. At the moment, if we were to get no further news, I would take the risk and start Cunha, because I think the chance of Cunha starting is definitely greater than the chance of him being benched. Again, sorry if this is just overthinking, but I would rather share the information that I have from Wolves fans rather than keep it for myself, or rather than just not bring it up. And they aren't 100% sure if Bellegarde's fit that Cunha definitely starts. I'm probably going to have him regardless. I just won't give him the armband. So Isak and Cunha have been in every single draft that I've built. The last forward spot I am finding incredibly difficult. The 3 players it is most likely to be probably right now is either Nilsson, Welbeck, or Raul Jimenez. If I was to change it now and not have even Nilsson, I think Raul Jimenez I'd chuck in there, because I do feel like I'm just lacking a little bit of Fulham attacking coverage. They could put a few goals past Southampton quite easily. I think Welbeck will be great in the absence of João Pedro, on penalties, at home, great data, tends to be good for 90 minutes, especially when João Pedro's not around. And West Ham are not a great team. So I like Welbeck, but at the moment, I've got Ivan Nilsson in there. The reason Ivan Nilsson is in there is across the last 10 game weeks again, if we're looking at that sort of decent-sized sample, he is up there at 0.78 non-penalty expected goals per 90. Firstly, that's exceptionally good across that period. So really good underlying data. Second in the league, and this isn't just players available for Game Week 34. This is second in the league out of all players, is Mateta at 0.55. So he is 0.23 non-penalty XG per 90 clear of the second best player in the Premier League. So if you are going based on data and chance accumulation, Ivan Nilsson is your guy. He's been getting so many big chances. He's also playing against, again, a United team that I do expect to rotate. And even if they go full strength, we're not a very good team. It is definitely a fixture to target there. The issue is, if Kluivert's on the pitch, Evanilson isn't on penalties. He's not on set pieces or anything like that. So it is just open play goal threat that you're relying on, unless obviously Kluivert's off the pitch, in which case I think Evanilson is second choice penalty taker. So I really like Evanilson, and he's a bit of a differential pick. I've seen a few people have him, of course, but I've not seen him in tons of free hit drafts. The other one that just keeps creeping back into my mind is Wissa. Could you see a situation where everyone loads up on like Strand Larsen against Leicester and Cunha against Leicester and Isak against Ipswich, and Mbeumo and Wissa against Forest away both get a goal and an assist each? It would be the most Brentford Wissa and Mbeumo thing ever. But do I want to double up on Mbeumo and Wissa against Forest away? Not really. As I said, Strand Larsen's an option. I could just go Cunha and Strand Larsen, both against Leicester at home. That would be a very, very good looking front three there. But Evanilson is just in my mind for some reason. I think it's that data I'm just struggling to overlook. And again, I do know how bad United can be and how inconsistent they are. And it does feel like a fixture I want a bit of action in. If you saw my draft earlier this week, I had a very similar sort of front seven, but I had Kluivert rather than Evanilson. There is part of me which, again, just put an extra penalty taker in there. Tap into the variance. Just hope that you get penalties and just put as many penalty takers as you can in there. And if that's the case, I could literally just switch Kluivert in for Evanilson and play a 3-5-2. But if they don't get a penalty, I definitely fancy Evanilson's chances of getting a return more than I do Kluivert's. And also, his minutes have tended to be a bit better. So that is the team as things stand. That is the starting 11. The bench, lots of people, by the way, asking, why have you got a strong bench? You can't bench boost in a free hit. I know that you can't obviously get the players off the bench unless players in your starting 11 miss out, but there is no reason to not have a strong bench. Let's say that a game randomly got called off, like randomly there were riots or something and one of the games got called off, or terrible weather that we weren't predicting. Why would you not have a strong bench just in case? The only reason you wouldn't have a strong bench if you can't deal with like the emotional distress of having points in your bench. But it makes no sense if you've got the money to not have as strong of a bench as possible, because you just never know what might happen. So obviously that's why my bench looks pretty strong in the free hit. Not because I expect to need it, but you do never know. So just to recap, the changes that might possibly take place before the deadline, I would say the biggest one that could potentially take place is just me deciding I think it's silly to not have Harvey Barnes in there. And I think Barnes at the moment would come in for one of Diaz or Mbeumo. If I brought in Barnes for Diaz or Mbeumo then, I would obviously have to switch Nick Pope out. At the moment, I would lean towards going for Kepa or Sanchez, but there is part of me that thinks I might potentially go for Leno and Cucurella. So take Sessegnon out because he's a minute's risk, put Leno in to cover the Fulham defence, and then go for Cucurella. In terms of other changes, other than maybe Harvey Barnes coming in, is to switch Evanilson to either Kluivert and go into a 3-5-2 and still have the Bournemouth attacker, or just switch him out for someone like Raul Jimenez or Welbeck, or just go for more of a punt in there as Strand Larsen potentially as well. I do think that it's mostly locked in. And also Diaz versus Jota. I'm very heavily considering just backing Diogo Jota. Let me know what you think of the team in general. Let me know what you think of those possible changes that I spoke about. I know the midfield won't be popular. People will say go for Barnes, don't go for double Newcastle defence, get rid of Cole Palmer. But if everyone is telling us to drop Cole Palmer, then he's going to become a differential, and in which case it makes me want to keep him even more. I'll leave it there. Let me know what you think of the team. Let me know what your team is as well. And yeah, this is the final video, so best of luck for Gameweek 34. So guys, there you have it. That is my Gameweek 34 team selection. And as I said, it is my final video this week because I'm at my friend's wedding for the next few days. If you did enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. I do appreciate all of the support this season. And if you are wanting me to talk about more players in detail and you are going to miss the deadline stream, I did record an episode of FPL Therapy, which went live on Wednesday, where I discuss pretty much every player that you could be looking at for Gameweek 34, the teams to target, and much, much more. So if you want some more content over the next couple of days, please do make sure to check out FPL Therapy, which is my podcast on Spotify, Apple, or on YouTube. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.